Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the upcoming book, The Only Witness, A History of the Shroud of Turin. It is a historical fiction tracing a possible yet plausible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today, we'll be speaking with Brenda Benton, co-founder of the British Shroud of Turin Society. And you can find out more at bstsnewsletter.com. But before we get started, I did want to tell a short story. A few weeks ago, my wife and I were in Washington, D.C., and visited the Museum of the Bible where their new Shroud exhibit was launched. It is definitely something that has to be on your bucket list. It's a great exhibit. And the Shroud of Turin is truly the only witness of the moment of Jesus's resurrection. They have a VP8 image analyzer, which is a critical piece in the scientific study of the shroud. They have a full-size replica of the shroud, a linen full-size replica on the wall, and my wife and I were just fascinated with that. And then I think the most interesting thing was that they had a camera that produces negative images. And it's the negative image that Secunda Pia first really saw the face of Jesus shine right through the camera. And nowadays, with an iPhone or an Android, you don't use negative images anymore. So they put that negative image generator on the wall, and you would take a negative picture of yourself because young folks don't know what a negative image is. And it's really fascinating when to understand that, first of all, that there's this negative of the shroud. And unfortunately, they've kind of now gone by the way of the buggy whips. We don't need any more buggy whips anymore. And that's because we have iPhones, and iPhones don't use negative images. In any case, if you get a chance, definitely plan a trip to Washington, D.C. and visit the Shroud exhibit at the Museum of the Bible. The exhibit ends right now in July of this year. Hopefully, they're going to consider extending it, but right now it's set for the end of July. And so get there before it's gone. So with that, let me introduce Brenda Benton. And she really has an interesting story on how she became involved in the Shroud. And I'm going to give a short version of that, and I'll let her start talking about the longer version. And it starts really weeks before their only child died. And they happened to see her and her husband, Stuart, David Rolfe's film, The Silent Witness, which was published in 1978. And the film is about the Turin Shroud and how it had a powerful impact on the rest of their lives. 33 years later, they met with Pam Moon. Through an amazing set of circumstances, Pam invited her and Stuart to be part of the British Shroud Exhibition team. And this led to them meeting many respected figures in the Shroud world. They also work with the British Shroud for the Turin Shroud, the British Society for the Turin Shroud, the British Society for the Turin Shroud, and she gives talks on the Shroud journey and the impact of Pam's exhibition and what it has on their visitors. So with that, Brenda, so great to have you. Let's get started. And so why don't you embellish the story that I just told? I'm sure there's a lot more in there, but please tell us then what your backstory is on the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say that we didn't start off the BSTS newsletter. That began in 1976 in preparation for David's film, The Silent Witness. So we've only come into it a good many years later. But I grew up in a church school, had a really good grounding. But when I left school, I didn't really think about God or church. And just, I met my husband, Stuart, and we were married 7 years when we had Zoe. Zoe was normal until she was 9 months old. And then she became ill with an inherited brain disease. And we found out that we were related just a couple of generations back. And there was a 1 in 4 chance of that happening again. So we decided not to have other children. But God has been so good because he's filled our lives with other things. But so yes, when just before Zoe died, our geneticist sent us to London, and we were going on the underground. We'd got some spare time before we caught the train back. We were on the underground, and I saw the face on the shroud for the first time. And it was almost as though this picture literally jumped off the wall, and it was advertising David's film, which was in a hotel, not in a cinema. And we went along, and I watched this film, and as it reenacted the crucifixion, and as we watched the Lord suffering, and it was so real, it was as though his suffering and our suffering came together. And then when Zoe died at 3 o'clock in the morning, just a few weeks later, we had the most incredible experience of meeting Jesus. Not that we could physically see him, but his presence filled the room, and we felt him take her, and we need never worry about her again. And we were wrapped in a warm blanket of love. But then obviously there were years of coming to terms with being childless. All I ever wanted was to be a wife and a mom. So the shroud sort of went into the background. But then at pivotal times in my life, it would always come to the fore. But for many years, I didn't have anyone that I could talk to. I didn't know anyone that knew anything about the shroud. And in later years, when I did speak about it, they'd say, well, the carbon dating, when the carbon dating came out, I had to seriously consider what I did believe. And it was quite a shock, really, because I knew in my heart that it was real. That was what I believed. But those doubts didn't last very long. So the shroud, that was my beginning story of the shroud, really, and that journey that I've been on.
Yeah, that's a very touching story. And, you're so right, though, when you think about what that radiocarbon dating did. It really set back the study and the understanding of the shroud, and not only whether it's authentic or not, but just the questions of, how could something like that be false when there's so much, showing that it's true. And then you have now in the last few years where the radiocarbon dating team has really been debunked, and their whole science and the statistics behind it has been almost totally debunked. And yet to recover I don't know if you'd call it the reputation of the shroud, but to recover the reputation of the shroud, it's still going to be maybe a couple of decades before it really, really comes back to where it was back in 78 after Stirp, and in 79 when David Rolfe's movie came out, and you had seen that movie and everything else that was going along. And then, man, it was like the legs were cut out from underneath the whole shroud and the following of the shroud.
Yes, I mean, it was incredible the way that we actually met Pam, because as I say, all these years I'd never met anybody that I could speak to about it, and then it's been 11 years since I met Pam, and I met her just a month after my husband Stuart had retired. So he didn't get a very long retirement. And the way that I met Pam was through her husband is an Anglican vicar, and we'd been to a christening at their church. And then my cousin, whose baby it was, told us that there was going to be this Turin Shroud exhibition. Well, my heart almost stopped, and I couldn't believe that there was something to do with the shroud. So I've got to be at this exhibition, and as it happened, we were on holiday, and it was in the middle of the holiday, and I couldn't go, and I was so devastated. But you know, God's time is perfect, and it was several years later. There was a gentleman came to our church, and I don't know why, because I never talked about it. I said about the Turin Shroud, and he said, "Oh, I know all about the Turin Shroud." He said, "I've just done the bishop's course, and the lady that and her husband that have led this course, she's got this Turin Shroud exhibition." So he knew all about it. He knew Pam. He gave me a phone number, and I wrote in her address, and I wrote to her, and she said, "How soon can I meet you?" And I'd waited 33 years to meet someone that I could talk to about the shroud. So that just opened so many doors. We've done incredible things. I think one of the biggest things that we've done that we would never have believed if anyone had have told us. You know, when Pam and I first met, if somebody had have said to us, "In a few years' time, you're going to be taking this exhibition to a Muslim event where Barry Schwartz is speaking, and there's 40,000 people, and Pam is going to be doing a live link on television to millions of people in Africa." I mean, you could not write the script, could you? You couldn't make up the story. And that was such an education for me, because these Ahmadiyya Muslims are just, I've learned so much from them, and we've built up this respect. And the thing that really surprised me, because I didn't know what to expect, was that they actually respect Jesus so much and are fascinated by the shroud. So it cuts across all. And one of the things that I loved that Barry said, because these Muslims, their motto is love for all and hatred for none, and they are persecuted. So, and he said, how amazing is it that a Jew is bringing a Christian relic to a Muslim people? So it cuts across all those barriers, and it's about, it's about love and respect, and hopefully that brings understanding, which is so important. So that's just one example. But to meet Barry Schwartz and Mark Goosin, and we've met so many. And also, perhaps I should go back now to just to talk about how I got involved in the British Shroud Society.
Yeah, let me interrupt you though, and just a comment on all of Abraham's people on the the Christian side, and then on the Jewish side, and then the Muslim side.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating, and Jesus, Esau is also mentioned in the Quran, and it is really fascinating that the level of understanding or the level of interest that they have in the shroud, and that God, whether you believe in Christianity, so Muslims don't believe in Christianity and Jesus, but they do believe that he was a prophet. And so then he did have, I guess, and I don't know, and I'm probably speaking out of turn, but, they still believe, I guess, that, that there are miracles that could be done. And the shroud is then a miracle of Jesus Christ, for them, the
Yeah.
prophet, for us, the savior and redeemer. So,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
very fascinating. And I really like Barry, his comment about, here I am, a Jew, talking about a Christian. Well, actually
Yes.
talking about a Jew, because Jesus was a Jew at the time.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
but in front of Muslims, it's so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is really amazing. So then there's only a couple of other big religions. We just have Hindu and Buddhism that we have to work on now.
Yeah. We've just an incredible experience, and really we've made some special friendships, and we've been given just such opportunities, wonderful opportunities. So yeah.
Yeah,
But if
absolutely. Yeah, so
yeah,
please go ahead
go
on
back,
the British
back to the
Society.
BST.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'd obviously never heard of the British Shroud Society, but it all began really just after my father had died. We'd been through a difficult time, and we decided to have a day out, and we went to a National Trust home, which is like a stately home. And on the way, there was a National Trust church. And we'd got some extra time. We said, oh, we'll pop in and look at this little church. So as we drove through the gates into this church, I experienced, and I've only experienced it twice, but I experienced exactly the same feeling as I did at the point of Zoe's death. It was incredible. This I can't really put it into words, but I had this wonderful experience. And as we started walking down, there's next to it is a large house, and there was an exhibition on. So we went in and we had a look at this exhibition, and it was all about a man named Leonard Cheshire. And Leonard Cheshire was a fighter pilot in the Second World War. He'd won medals for bravery, and he'd done amazing things, really amazing things in the war. Very respected man. And he just died, and that was why the exhibition was on. So we're looking around this exhibition, and there's a door that says chapel, and I said to Stuart, I've got to go in there. I've got to go and have a look. So we walked in, and as we walked in, on the left-hand side was an alabaster head, and I said to Stuart, that's the face of the Turin Shroud. And he said, how do you know? And I said, I just know that it's the face of the Turin Shroud. There wasn't a word in that chapel to tell you what it was. But as I was standing looking at it, Stuart said, look behind you. And there's the face, the black and white face of the Turin Shroud. And, at that time, I had spoken about it to one or two people, and just people had just dismissed it. And so we went and looked in the church, and then we came back, and I said, I've just got to go and sit in this. I've got to go and sit in this chapel, and just with the Lord, and I just knew that I knew that there's no doubt in my mind that this is what it is. When I got back to the car, Stuart had picked up a leaflet, and it said that the chairman of the British Shroud Society was Leonard Cheshire, and that somebody else that was passionate about the shroud had made him this alabaster bust. So that was the first time I knew about Leonard Cheshire. And then I'd found out about that BSTS existed. Well, by this time it was sort of, Zoe died in 1978. This was 1990, 97, 98. And my niece had just had a computer, you know, when computers, not a lot of people had one. And I said, will you just put in the British Shroud Society? And there's all the information I need to get to Turin to see the real thing. So I actually went and had that wonderful experience. And Pam and I have talked about it, and she went 10, later. And the difference in the security, there was very little security. But as we were walking up to the cathedral, there were like thousands and thousands of people. You're given a time slot, 2 minutes, and everybody was chatter, and there were notices up saying silence, please respect where you are. And as people walked over the doorstep, silence fell. It was just incredible experience. So I'm very privileged that I've actually been to see the Shroud. So Leonard Cheshire was always there. And then Stuart brought me a book about his life story. And after he'd been this brave fighter pilot, he had a nervous breakdown, and that's when he became a Christian. And then he was seriously ill, and someone gave him a picture of the Shroud, and he used to just contemplate the Shroud. And he was an amazing man, and he did amazing things. And so he was my first connection with the BSTS. At the time that I joined, Ian Wilson was the editor, and lived in Australia. Well, he lives in Australia, but he spent a lot of time in Bristol, and we've got friends in Bristol, so there was always that connection. I never dreamt that one day I'd meet Ian Wilson. Sometimes you have to pinch yourself to think, is it real? David Rolfe, I met David through Pam in the exhibition, and David asked Pam and I if we knew anywhere that we could organise, for Ian to do a talk. He was coming to this country. So there were two actually, and we went to both of them. But when he came to Bristol, he actually stayed with my friend. So, we spent 2 days with him, and the stories that he has to tell. And that was just an incredible experience. So because I'd helped David, because it was in my friend's church and I was sort of helping David had just taken on the editorship of the British Shroud Society, which actually had very much waned. It had gradually gone downhill since the carbon dating. And then David sort of took it on, I think, because there just wasn't anyone else to take it on. And he said, would Stuart and I work alongside him? So we do the distribution, and I oversee the membership. So during lockdown, I actually spent a year sorting out the membership and getting everything in order. And we've just seen it go from strength to strength to strength. And then, and in a matter of a couple of years, God has brought the right people with the right gifting at the right time. And there's a team of 9 of us now. And we've, it's just such a privilege to be working. And
you definitely have some interesting experiences. I'm very jealous that you actually got to see the Shroud in person. I'm not sure whether I believe the next one might be in 2025, and
yes,
I'm hoping somehow in some way I can get at least a 30-second, maybe a 2-minute view where my wife and I can go
Yeah,
over and
yeah,
see it. That is
yeah,
definitely,
yeah,
after having spent, well, the last 10 years probably trying to understand more about the Shroud and Ian Wilson, and you mentioned Ian, his book is really the
oh,
historical basis for just about everything that I have in my book.
yes,
So I follow his story, and I follow his story of the Shroud going to Edessa and being the Mandylion, and then going to Constantinople, et cetera, et cetera. And so his work and all the work that he's done is very inspiring to so many people, and certainly inspired
yes,
me to write what I did. So yeah.
yes. He's done amazing things for the, yeah. And the thing was that, when I first met him, he was always so encouraging. He really encouraged me, and it would take time, and we'd write to each other because there wasn't the internet then. That's how far we go back. So yes, it has been just this incredible journey.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. That was my watch. But yeah, I gotta remember to turn my watch off too, I guess, in the future. But yeah, and everybody that I've met related to the Shroud, and I've now that I've got my book, it's almost done. I've met a lot of so many wonderful people. Barry Schwartz, probably the first person that
Yeah,
I went and I wanted to buy one of the, so I have one of the front images, the black and white front images of the Shroud from him, and we've become
yes.
friends. I've spoken to him, a number of times, and I've seen him present. He presented at the Museum of the Bible, and then a lot of other Americans, and you're now my first non-American, so I'm breaking through.
What a privilege. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So
so tell us about David Rolfe's new project with
with
what's the name of the movie that he's putting out now?
Who Can He Be?
Who Can He Be? That's right. Yeah, so
Yes,
tell us about that.
yeah. Well, from when I first met David, he'd always said that he wanted to make another film. Um, and as I say, when he first had this opportunity to do this second film, he had to really consider whether he could continue being the editor, because of the commitment, obviously. But we sort of said, we need you, because he's so brilliant at what he does. Um, and and so, we've sort of got Andrew Willey, who is like an editor. He takes a lot of David's work off, and then he'll sort of sift through it, and David will sort that out. Then we've got Michael, who's like a manager editor, and Michael Kowalski and his wife Lynn Reed
Mhm.
does the Facebook page. We've got Philippa Foster, who is what she does. She's artistic. She uses many of her gifts, but her main gift is to proofread, which is such an important job.
Mhm.
Then, of course, there's Pam and the exhibition, and her husband Phil is the treasurer. So, and we all, as I say, we all sort of work. We've all got different gifts in, and of course, Stuart. I mean, if it wasn't for Stuart, I couldn't do any of this because I'm not really into technology. So he's very much hands-on, has been with the exhibition. So yeah, we are a good team, and Michael's got so many giftings in so many ways. So we'll work together
Mm.
really well.
So you said you've met so many people through the exhibits and through the BSTS. So I'm just curious, how do like children and teenagers versus more mature adults,
Yeah.
tell us, maybe, I'm just curious, what
about the exhibition.
reaction? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, I could write a book. I could write several books probably with the stories that I have. But children in particular, I mean, actually, Pam and I wrote an article about the impact on children. And Emanuela Marinelli, who is an Italian expert, we've got to know her and Bruno Barbary at the Jalsa. And so Emanuela had shared stories with us. So she joined us, and there's some incredible stories in there about the children. But I think the one that really stands out to me was a teenager who came, and he'd written in the comment book, "This is better than Netflix." And to me, you don't get better than that, do you? But it's their innocence and their interest. As I say, so many stories. But it speaks to people across the board, really. So many times we've had people that have got no church background, none at all, haven't, just nothing, and they'll go past a church or a venue, wherever we are, and they see that face on the shroud, and they're drawn in, and they stand before the shroud replica, and just stand and weep. We've had sort of rugby players, and it cuts across everything, really, all sorts of people. One of the people that stand out very much for me is a lady that came to an exhibition that we did in Nottingham Cathedral. And I wasn't actually talking to her at the time, but I was telling someone about seeing David Rolfe's film and the impact it had, and how the Lord's suffering and our suffering came together. And then she was actually helping with the tea in the refreshments. And I was talking to someone else, but she'd overheard me. And apparently she went and saw the film. And then she came back a couple of days later, and she said, "I've had to come back to see you." She said, "Because I did overhear what you were saying." And she said, I went in and I watched David's film, and what happened to you happened to me. She said, because I'd been in agony with a hip problem for a very long time. She said, and I felt the Lord's suffering and our suffering come together. She said, and I was so deeply moved, I went into the cathedral and had a time of prayer. She said, and then I went back and I carried on with my duties. She said, and it was only on the way home that I realised the pain has gone. and she believed that she really did have a healing. And the exhibition has the power to touch people without anyone saying a word. It has. Sometimes the Lord will use us in that we'll come alongside people, but sometimes he'll say, well, I'll do this. He does it on his own. And a typical example of that was when we were in Norwich Cathedral, and there was a lady came. I didn't see her. This was a story told to me by one of the stewards. And this lady came in. She was like a business lady, very well dressed and well spoken, and she said, this lady, the lady that was welcoming people, said, started to speak to her, and she said, I'm really not into all this stuff. She said, but actually, everybody's talking about it. So I thought I'd better come and see for myself. So she said she started walking along the boards, with the information boards, because Pam's information boards are very biblically based. So there's like the crown of thorns and the flagrant, but all the scriptures are written there. So she started walking down the boards, and then she came back to the beginning. She started again. And an hour later, she came to this same lady and said, I don't know what's happened to me, but I need to go home and reassess my life.
Wow.
You know,
What a powerful story.
and that's just one example of the many examples that we've had of people they have an encounter with God. They really do.
Yeah.
And for me, when we first started doing exhibitions, was absolutely brilliant, because for the first time in my life, I'd got people to talk to. I look back at it now and I think how silly, really. But I thought I was the only one in the world that knew about it. You know what I mean? Because I'd never met anyone. And then I meet Pam, and suddenly my life is full to overflowing with people. But one of the things, when going back to the British Shroud Society, one of the things that the vision that I had when we started working with David was that, like, for that 33 years, I was in a bit of a wilderness, really. And there must have been a lot of other BSTS members in the same position as me that didn't actually have physical contact with anybody. And what I wanted to do was make people feel that they belong to something, and they belong to something really important. And they do belong to something important. So I've got to know so many of our members. You know, I've written some of them a little note or a card, and they've got back. And I love to hear their stories of their journey, because everyone will be different. Everyone will be different.
That is so very true. All of us have such a different path to how we came to Christ.
Yes.
And then fell away. And I was very similar to you after I went to college. My parents weren't taking us to church anymore. And so more or less fell away. And then it wasn't for many, many years later that coming back to the church and then realizing what I had missed out on for so many years.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is one more story that I particularly like to tell, because this is one of my most precious stories. And we were in Worcester Cathedral, and there was a lady came. Actually, there was a lady came, and also a gentleman that was with her. And the gentleman was very anti-shroud. It's very rare that we've ever had difficulties with people that are usually lovely. But this gentleman was, you don't believe all this stuff, and and he was. So I just said to him, have you read the boards? Have you read, because he was talking about the carbon dating. And the lady that was with him, that I don't think was not his wife or anybody, and she was standing in front of the shroud, and she said, well, I am a Christian, but I don't believe in all this. And I said, well, we're not here to to prove or disprove anything. You take from this what you will. She said, but I would like to know how you got involved. And this lady was actually she'd been a paediatrician. So she was because Zoe's illness was so rare, she was very interested, and I told her the story. and I could see there were tears welling in her eyes. And at the end of it, she said to me, "Didn't your daughter leave you a beautiful inheritance?" And that says it all. She
Yeah.
did leave us a
Yeah.
beautiful inheritance.
How true.
And
How true.
yeah, and all those years, and this was a gift from God, that I have never felt bitter about Zoe, and that was a gift. And you know, her life has given us so much, and all through those years, there have been young people that have come into our lives that have needed a mum and dad figure. Do you know what I mean? For whatever reason that they haven't got their own parents. So there's been so many blessings along the way.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to be the person that I was, because it's only because of Zoe's life that I'm the person that I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. What a remarkable story. It's very touching. And
Yeah.
yeah, you know, I've told a couple of other stories. So my mom, she lost my brother when he was about a year and a half old, and I can't imagine. I mean, the same for you. I can't imagine what that would be like, and I can't imagine what Mary would have felt like as she's sitting there, you know, looking up at her son suffering as much as he did, and then you know, I don't know, you know, to see it, you know, your child or whatever be tortured
Yes.
and go through that much, you know, and then pass
Yes.
away in front of you. That's a
Yeah.
definitely a remark, you know, and not an experience you want any parent to go through.
No, it's definitely not. And yes, I mean, you know, I was brought up in the Anglican church, and I now go to a Pentecostal church. So I think I'm quite unusual as well in the Shroud world, because that's one church that we've not really broken into yet. But yeah, so, and yet Mary has had such an impact on my life, because she was Jesus's mother. And yeah, she's very special to me.
Yeah.
There's that connection. And I think one of the things that I've loved doing in the exhibition, it's absolutely amazing how many people, women have come that have lost a child. And I haven't actually said, but it's like when they see the shroud, it sort of brings up a lot of emotions. And so they'll just pour the heart out. You know, I'll go up and I'll say, "Are you okay?" Because I can see there. And then they'll just tell me, and I'm able to come alongside them and pray with them and comfort them and give them hope, really. So Zoe is part of everything that we do. She's still such a big part of our lives.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you could, and she has to be, and then to have brought her to, you know, having had her bring you to the Shroud, and now your whole
Yes,
moving forward, that inheritance that she gave you is
she
it's
is
just like, yeah,
incredible.
it really is.
Yeah. Yeah, just incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. It
So I
is.
do have one other question though, to get maybe more positive here, is so what are some of the commonly asked questions that you get from
Oh,
visitors?
yeah. Well, there's just one that we're asked, more than anything, really, and that is, why is it called the Turin Shroud? Because a
Fair
lot of
enough.
people don't know that's why it's called the Turin Shroud. And we find that a lot of people find it difficult to actually find the image. They, you know, you can see them puzzling, and we'll go up and say, you know, can you see it? Sometimes they see faces in the burn marks, or but it's the joy of the recognition. What I can see him, and it's like it's a revelation.
Yeah,
an absolute revelation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is. And but you're right though, you know, to see that and if you get too close, you can't really see very well.
No.
And you have to
No.
kind of be, you know, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 feet back, and then
Yes.
you can finally see everything in context, and you can see his hands and his feet,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then the wounds, and it is amazing, and it's an amazing image. And I liked I met at the Museum of the Bible, the launch of the exhibition. His name is Andrew Casper. He's a professor of Baroque art in Italy, and one of the things he said was and he wrote a book. It's called The Artful Relic, and he goes, "This is it's a beautiful the shroud is a beautiful work of art, but not at the hand of man, but at the hand of God." And the way he puts it, and I didn't do a good job at it, but the way he puts it, you know, it's an artful relic, and but it's at the hand of God. And
Yes.
you know, what a thing that,
Yes.
you know, that he left us to be able to
Yeah.
you know, to look at and talk about, and also understand and use it as a way to strengthen our faith, and everything else that goes along with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first time that I was asked, you know, someone said to me, but the Bible said you shouldn't worship a graven image. And I said, but it's not made by human hands. You know, it's not, you know, made by a human. It defies science, and it's incredible, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And there's a whole other set of argumentation about, you know, how that you know, one commandment influenced what happened with the shroud right after you know, right after his death, and whether it was shown or not, or hidden or not. And
Yeah.
anyway, that's a whole nother story and a whole nother topic. Would love to
Yes.
talk with you about that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
is there anything else that we didn't get to talk about that you'd like to mention?
No, I think we have sort of covered most things.
Fantastic.
Perhaps I could just tell you one last story,
Please.
shall I?
Yeah.
Again, we were in Worcester Cathedral, and there was a young woman came with her son, and her son would be sort of 15, 16. And I could see that this young man was really engrossed in everything that, you know, that he was seeing. And so I went, and his mum obviously wasn't too interested. So I actually went and spoke to the mum, and she said, my son's always had a fascination for this. She said he wants to be a scientist. She said, and he can't work out, you know, how he wants to find out how this is come to be. And she said, it's quite incredible that we're here, because, as I say, he'd always had this thing about the shroud. She said, but the only reason that we're here is because last weekend my daughter was doing the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, and she'd been away for the weekend, and one of the things that she was doing to get this award was take photographs. And on the way back, she'd lost a camera and with the photographs, and she was desperate to get them back. And she thought she might have left it at a service station that they stopped at. And she said, it's really strange, she said, because my son has two Christian friends. They'd got no, you know, church background. He got two Christian friends, and the friends said, we're going to pray that you get that camera back. So she said, we sort of smiled, really. she said, so we've just been to the service station and there's the camera waiting for us. She said, we didn't know this exhibition was on. She said, and we've just stopped on the way back to have a drink in Worcester. And we thought, shall we go and have a look at this cathedral? And there's the shroud. And you think you couldn't write the script, could you? Know, it's just incredible that there's stories like that where people have definitely been in the right place at the right time. And I just felt that, yeah, God's hand is upon your lives through those praying friends.
Exactly. Yeah. How interesting, and you're so right. You know, and it's always said God works in mysterious ways, but He certainly does. And
He does.
Stories are proof to that. That you know that He's there. He's watching over us, and His hands are somewhere doing something, and it works to our blessing and our benefit. And we are so blessed to have had, you know, Jesus when He was here alive, and then certainly then His resurrection, and now Easter is so close, and
yes,
and we'll be celebrating that, you know, exactly that resurrection. So
yeah. So I mean, if people are interested in David's film, it's on if the Who Can It Be website. There's a website, and you can actually sign up, and when there's information coming out, you know, you can get that information, and then you will be able to stream it online through that website. So it won't be going out into cinemas. It'll be, which is brilliant because it can go out all around the world. So
yeah. I think even more people can get to see it because it's streamed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. So whocanitbe.com. Whocanitbe.com.
Yeah.
And when will it be coming out roughly?
Well, hopefully around Easter.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So very, 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 very close. So that's yeah. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much, Brenda. You've been awesome, and I really appreciate you taking the time today and participating. And hopefully this will help other people to get to know about the Shroud and get to know about Jesus, and then hopefully either strengthen their faith or bring some people back into the fold, or bring new people into the fold. And otherwise, so you're the website for the British Society of the Turin Shroud.
Yeah, if you just search for BSTS newsletter, you get through to the website, and you can actually click to get on the Facebook page, because we've got Facebook as well. And there's so much good information out there. They can see you with Barry, and you know, so I mean, that's what I love about what's happening at the moment, that everything's working together for the same cause. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, it really is. And yes, and I've been out to the Facebook page for the for BSTS, and then bstsnewsletter.com, and then whocanitbe.com. So really critical websites. I will put in a plug though for Museum of the Bible, museumofthebible.org. Absolutely worth visiting if you get a chance before July. And if you're there, please tell everybody to keep the exhibit open way past July. Otherwise, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. And please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. Brenda, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Guy.